everybody, and welcome back to part 3 of my new Making Venus series. If you don't know what this series is, I'm making a fursuit of my new character Venus. And the series will go through all the different processes and parts that went into making the costume, and I'm not sure how many videos there are, but so far there are 3, and I will link all the previous ones in the description. Without further ado, I hope you find my process interesting / enjoyable, and yeah, let's start the video. So, I was an idiot and forgot to actually record me taping, but the process basically goes with you wrap the entire head base in plastic wrap, and then you cover the plastic wrap in tape such as masking tape or duct tape, and then you color all the patterns on top of it. And once those are done, you basically cut everything else, and I think I remembered to record the rest of it. So here I'm cutting out the pieces, and what I usually do if I have a fursuit head with a lot of little pieces is I like to cut one piece, and then I like to color on the head base where that piece was. And then if I need help later on, figuring out where a piece went, then I can just look at the base and sort of match the shape of the pattern pieces to the what's drawn on the base. One thing I do with parts such as the muzzle or the cheeks is I add something called darts, and darts help when there's a heavily curved piece to make it so that when you actually sew everything together, it lays flat. Because if you have something super curved and you try to push it down to trace on the fur, it's not going to lay flat. So adding darts is a great way to make that work. I decided to try something new with cheeks this time. Usually I just leave it all one piece, but since I had stripes, I decided to cut it into 2 pieces, upper and lower cheeks. And with the stripes going down the middle of them. Another thing I like to do is to be able to find which side is which. I mark the flip side with an X so I know I don't accidentally cut 2 pieces of the same side, because I'll mark the flipped one with an X, so it might say upper cheek and then upper cheek X. It's very useful, and I wish I learned it sooner. Here are all the pieces! This was very fun to sew together and really time consuming, but the result was definitely worth it. Now here is the fun part, and by fun I mean the most annoying and notorious part of making a fursuit, which is cutting out all the pieces. I believe that cutting every single piece on this suit actually took me like a few hours, if I'm being sure. And this was just the head. I still have the arm sleeves and the feet paws and the leg sleeves and the tail, and it's just way too many pieces. And guess what happened here? I cut out the lower jaw in the wrong fur direction. I actually had to go back and fix this later, and it sucked, but you make mistakes, and that's just part of being a fursuit maker. You'd be amazed at how many times I do this though, for real. What I figured out to do is I use something called a chalk marker, which is actually washable. And what I learned from some other makers' experiences is if you use markers on fur that is lightly colored, sometimes the markers will bleed through when you wash it. So I've actually leaned over to tracing fur patterns with chalk, and these chalk markers from the dollar store are just the bomb. So for this build, I actually bought this really beautiful gray fur. And I found it on Bigsy Fabric, and it's just the best quality and one of the best grays I've ever used. I actually had gray candy shag, but it was two-toned, and everything else on the suit wasn't two-toned, and it would sort of look unnatural with the other remaining colors, so I actually bought a different kind of gray, and it definitely looks better than it would have looked if I had used the candy shag. Now here's where I get to shading. Shading is probably my favorite part of building a fursuit head. I don't know, there's something about it that's just so satisfying. One of the things that you do have to be a little bit careful about though is what pieces you're shaving. Because some pieces require like only half of it to be shaved, and other pieces require like all of it to be shaved, and that part can get a little bit tricky. Another thing I've learned to do is with pieces where you have to cut a big chunk out of it, such as the dart on the muzzle, I don't cut the dart until after I shave it, because if there's too much empty space that gets cut out before you shave, then it can sort of fold over or shift, and then your shave is uneven. So you can see I only cut out the pieces where the red would go after I shaved those pieces, which is a very vital step if you want your shave to look nice and clean. And every now and then, when my table gets pretty cluttered with fur, I just bring my trash can over and swipe all the shaved bits of fur. One thing that my family always does to reduce waste is we actually sometimes put the excess fur shavings out in a woodpecker feeder crate out in my yard, and we let the birds use the fibers to make their nests. And now we get to the really sucky part, which is sewing all these pieces together. And as you can see, what I like to do if I'm just sewing in my room, or even sewing in the living room, which is what I usually do, is I just put like a movie on in the background. To just give me something to watch in the background, and I put on The Last Jedi here because I like Star Wars. What I'm doing here is I'm actually sewing in the stripes into the cheek pieces first. And usually what I do is I actually sew all the darts first, so like the darts on the muzzle, the darts on the cheeks. And that way I don't really have to go through them later. Those are the things that I do first. And after all that sewing, Venus's face is finally finished. And this is only the face, remember, I still have the ears and the back of the head to go. All the seams on this are sewn in, and let me just tell you, it was a pain, but it turned out really nicely. And I was very happy as to how it came out. I'm going to do a touch-up shave later, but unfortunately my clippers died while I was shaving my dog, so I still need to buy a new one, but it definitely looks exactly how I wanted it to turn out. The teeth were fleece, the jaw is lined, I got a tongue, the nose is minky, and once everything was furred, I added a little black line around the nose. And I made sure that there was red fur that sort of led up to the hair. And here she is so far. I ended up actually adding eyelids on top of the felt here. How I did that is I took some EVA foam and I heated it up and sort of curved it with my heat gun. Then I covered it in fleece and just hot glued it on the top. The reason I added these eyelids, they aren't removable, but she just didn't look as angry as I wanted her to be. And I did the same on both sides and tried to get it as symmetrical as I could. I also actually ended up doing some dry brushing on the fur. Come on, focus. I ended up doing some dry brushing on the fur to sort of blend the colors a little bit more. As you can see, it sort of did that on the cheeks too because it just looked a little bit too sudden. And there's a little bit of dry brushing on the gray there too. And the steampunk goggle things I ordered are perfect proportions to the actual head. They're exactly how I wanted them to be. And these just sort of loop. They don't actually go across the back of the head, they sort of loop from the forehead under the ear to like underneath the hair. And I'm not sure about this yet, but I think I might actually be adding more hair once I get the back of the head furred. I'm gonna make more hair that sort of goes out a little bit more, and maybe more sort of down on the neck, almost like a fur mohawk. So those are sort of my plans, and this time I'm going to do that after I fur the ears, because I made the mistake of putting the fur on, like making the hair before I actually had the ears, and I didn't have a pattern for these. So what I ended up happening was I had a lot of trouble patterning it, and I wasn't actually sure if I was able to get the fur all the way down to the base, because the hair got in the way a lot of the patterning. So what I'm going to do is I have all the earpieces cut. Well, not cut, but I definitely have the earpieces patterned, and when I cut them, I'm going to make sure that I add a little bit more extra fur on the bottom so I can make sure it's long enough. So yeah, that's how it's going. Now it's time to make the neck. For the neck, I decided to use Seoul Enterprises pattern because it was affordable and it looked like it would turn out really nicely. And it did. Here's the chart showing how all the different pieces fit together. And here are all the little pieces. Since Venus has a pattern on her neck, I had to take the pieces together and draw on the patterns, then cut it out again. And now comes the all-time great part of making a fursuit, cutting out all the pieces. Yes, you can really tell how much I love cutting out pieces, can't you? Cutting out pieces is probably my least favorite part of making a fursuit, Because it just gets so tedious and it's just so annoying. Plus, like, the position you're in can sort of make your back hurt and blah blah blah. But believe it or not, just this many pieces, which isn't even a lot, took me like 23 minutes to actually cut out, because that was actually the original length of the footage before I sped it up. So here you go, enjoy me cutting out pieces of fabric, because that's super entertaining. And now I have to sew everything together, and it's also very annoying and very tedious. But it's the only way to really make a frizzy look good, right? So you gotta do it. Pinning, 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 pinning pieces. I actually had so many problems with my sewing machine before this. Like, when I was sewing this, it would keep jamming up and I would keep having to like redo it, and then my bobbin ran out and I had to redo that. And it just got so annoying that I actually just stopped filming most of it. Because like half of what I was doing was just like my thread jamming up and I couldn't figure out why, but I finally got it done. So, yeah. So the art that I'm showing you now is actually sort of inaccurate to the character now, but Venus has 2 red stripes on her neck instead of 4, as you can see here. And those pieces were too weird of a shape to be able to machine sew in, so I actually had to hand sew those in, and it sucked, but it turned out really nicely. So, without further ado, neck! Introducing Venus's neck. Pretty cool, right? So after all the sewing and all the gluing and all the stupid bits I didn't want to have to do, Venus was finally done. And the hair, oh my god, it was probably the most tedious part, but it turned out really awesome. All the individual little spikes, all the layering, all the heat gunning, just all that took so long and so much time, but it turned out awesome. And here I am somehow finding an extra little pin that I forgot. Thank you so much for watching part 3 of Making Venus, my series. If you liked the video, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It really means a lot to me. And stay tuned for part 4 coming soon.